Okay, what up, y'all? This is your boy, and welcome back. There have been posts and tweets that surfaced around recently, and it caught people by storm, and people are freaking about it. So, this being a WoW and gaming channel mostly, I want to talk about it. So, first of all, this is not a Final Fantasy bad WoW good video or an attempt at trying to trigger people. I myself am not triggered. I actually appreciate it, and I will try to hold the middle ground as much as possible. So I think this actually amounts to a discussion, and let's see where it's at. I think the tweet is kind of misleading, and at the same time there are a lot of factors that can back it up, so let's talk about it. So the claim here is pretty huge. Final Fantasy XIV has become the most actively played MMO, even surpassing WoW this year, and it's kind of surprising considering how when you talk about the top dogs of the MMO market, you always think about World of Warcraft in the first place. Like, it's always there. This data, or should I say evidence, is taken solely from Google searches and not the literal number of players, since MMOs don't display those anymore. So let's take a look into account what backs up this claim. So everyone and their grandma agrees that Shadowlands had a good launch, and it was the biggest selling PC game in 2020 next to Cyberpunk. It makes everyone wonder, how is this even possible? How does it sink this low? Well, first batch of an expansion, which is ongoing still, by the way, and ending on the 28th of this month. Well, it's the longest a patch has ever been, so you see less tuning to classes and balancing, and on top of that, it is kind of a norm that player numbers usually dip after the first 3 months of an expansion or a patch, because people just want to experience the fresh content and then dip, so this happens to every expansion, say Mists of Pandaria, Warlords, Legion, and everyone's favorite, BFA 2. So another major factor is that the last expansion, BFA, had such a negative reception from the majority and vocal audience, and even though there's lots of things I liked about it, I can see where those come from, and so the game is still recovering from Battle for Azeroth. And on top of that, there are people who are just in general bitter against Blizzard, which I guess rightfully so. I can't speak for them, but for both loads of reasons, I'll give one example, and that being the Blitzchung incident. Yeah, we all know how that turned out. So at the same time, there are people who are boycotting Blizzard regardless of the quality of the game. So it's pretty reasonable that there's a dip in the player base right now. On top of that, Blizzard launched TBC Classic, so handful of players went over there temporarily or some permanently, some to relive the good old days and some to experience TBC for the first time. So the players are spread out and divided. Even the majority, more than 2/3 of my B tags, are all playing it, since the current retail is stale at this point, and they want to experience TBC or just to experience some kind of fresh content. One thing I'd like to mention is that almost all my B tags are chat healers that I found from BFA and Shadowlands, so they are active retail players, which further enhances my point that the pivot of this article happening is the season being too long and Blizzard splitting its player base through TBC Classic launch. Those are basically the biggest factors which can back up the article. So now at this point, it feels like I'm being apologetic for Blizzard and not acknowledging the feats of Final Fantasy XIV. So let's talk about Final Fantasy XIV. So FF14 has always been at an all-time high. It has a positive reception from longtime Final Fantasy fans and MMO fans who are new to it. A funny fact is, the guy, my friend who actually recruited me to retail, it was an 8.2 by the way, was actually playing Final Fantasy 14 at the time when I first joined, so we never actually played together until the next season. So he praised the game for its PvE, the soundtrack, and experience in general. On top of that, it's casual friendly, and since he isn't as sweaty of a player as I am, it was definitely gonna be a good experience for him. So there was never a low point for the game to begin with, other than the offline game that was a failure, which has been since rebooted with the launch of this MMO in 2013. The game has always been highly praised for its solid mechanics and progression, and the community commended Yoshida for turning the project around. Like, can you recall the last time the WoW community praised a developer or something? Yeah, I don't think so. So on top of that, it's a cross-platform game, so you can play it at the PS3, 4, and 5, as well as your PC. So if you look up the best MMOs play, then this game will always be in the conversation ever since its launch. And they have released 3 expansions up to this point, and the 4th coming this year too. The game has frequent updates, and developers feel like friends because they communicate well with the player base, so in general they care. This is something the WoW community feels like they lack, you know, the dev communications with the player base, and we start to see the devs as out of touch. And every time there's a dev interview coming with some top player when it comes to PvE or PvP, even after it's long overdue, we treat it like it's the second coming of Jesus, and this should not be happening. We should be having frequent dev interviews, or they should always make statements, you know. Okay, so off topic again, going back to Final Fantasy 14. So the high and strong points of it is dev communication and the raids, and for a mostly PvP guy, I still prefer Guild Wars 2 over this, but I appreciate that they are doing well, and I appreciate that they're the formidable competition to WoW, because let the Boltman do the talking here. Can't say any better than he does.
The thing is that it's better for everybody for both games to be good. Competition breeds excellence. If there's no reason to compete against anything, then the motivation to make a good product goes down. If you are a Final Fantasy Andy, you should want WoW to be good, because that means that Final Fantasy can steal the good ideas from WoW and put them in your game. If you are a WoW Andy, you should want Final Fantasy to be good, so then Blizzard can steal the good ideas from Final Fantasy and then put them in WoW. That's the way it should work. Like it's great. Everybody should want both games to be good.
Yes, as a WoW Andy, you must want Final Fantasy to do well, and as a Final Fantasy Andy, you must want WoW to do well so the competition could go on. Like, how do you think DC and Marvel dominated the comic book industry? I'll give you a good guess. Yep, by just copying off each other. I can't believe when people say, "Oh, Thanos is a ripoff of Darkseid." They think they are gonna blow our minds, when in reality, yeah dude, the water is wet, like, no doubt. But the thing is, rip off or not, one is in one of the highest grossing movies of all time, meanwhile the other struggles to be even in a cinematic universe, not to mention a movie to shine on. So clearly someone did the execution right. Even Superman is not a 100% original idea, and it's kind of a ripoff of Philip Wilde's pulp novel called Gladiator. But there's a reason he's always the top 3 most popular superheroes of all time. And I'm pretty sure none of you know who Philip Wilde is before I made this, but you always knew who Clark Kent is. Then again, when you think of something revolutionary, it's gotta be inspired by something. The point I'm trying to make is, like the Boltman said, competition breeds excellence, and everyone can agree on that. So as a PvP guy, I thought, wouldn't it be great if Final Fantasy XIV overhauled their PvP and made it in a way to compete with WoW? Then the WoW PvP aspect will actually have a formidable competition, and the dev team will actually have to try harder to be competent in order to be the best PvP game possible. I tell this a lot to my friends that every once in a while when a new MMO gets announced, there's always this WoW hater that comes around, says something along the lines of, "Oh, this game is actually gonna be the WoW killer, guys. I swear it this time." And my raw and actual reactions, I may or may not say it out, is that it's always, I wish, man. It's not that I hate WoW that much, but wouldn't it be great if there was an MMO with a better PvP than WoW? Yeah, I could only wish. You see, only thing the PvP community wants as much as the WoW haters is a WoW killer. What they have been feeling, and is more apparent recently, is that there is just not a game, and even I agree on this. There is just no game that compares to how fun, diverse, deep, and creative WoW PvP can be. And it has a lot of potential even for esports and all. But the thing is, it feels like the devs are always half-assing it due to the lack of competition. So I kind of agree on that. So I appreciate that Final Fantasy is raising the roof and they should keep doing it. It's just that it's mostly PvE based, so that's not for me. Although I've been hearing that Final Fantasy is getting some kind of PvP overhaul. I don't know, it could be wrong, but I hope that's true. So WoW Arena can have a competition. And another reason I'm not playing is that I'm broke and I can't afford it. So, well, to no one's surprise, on the other hand, people have personal attachments to heroes or their characters or the fantasy of the world their hero is placed in. For example, there is never gonna be another Unholy Death Knight in another game. The same way there's never gonna be another Faceless Void outside of Dota. So people won't just unsub or playing the game because the devs made a bad decision every now and then. But at the same time, that makes their longtime players bitter, which I feel is well deserved. So I didn't even know this, but I looked into Twitter recently and saw that Blizzard actually put up a 9.1 release trailer, but quickly got unlisted due to it being bombarded with dislike. Like, you know, here it shows the rightfully deserved bitterness of the community. It's been 7 months now, and without any prior announcements or heads up, they announced 9.1 out of the blue because I guess Final Fantasy was doing well. The point I'm trying to make is we should push game companies to keep on, pushing the boundaries, strive for the challenge, so the product that we consume is polished and well-rounded in the best way possible than ever before. And those are my thoughts on it. So 9.1 is releasing on the 29th of this month, which means my retirement was greatly exaggerated. So all's well ends well, I guess. And as always, this is your boy Killian Jenkins, Unholy PvP forever. And I'll be seeing you guys very soon in the next one. Peace.